what an FT circular is?
TOB just stands for Full-Time Office Bearer Circular, so an internal document for the full-time office bearers.
And you're a full-time office bearer.
Yeah.
Those are the office bearers elected to the
Absolutely,
role.
yeah.
So the national office and those at your level.
And the ones at the area offices all get.
And the local.
Yeah, would get copies of this.
Thank
Not
you.
representatives, but those that are in elected position and based in the east, the west and the north of the country.
Oh, a higher level of office bearers. It's more of a strategic sort of document.
Yeah.
Right. And see the 9th of June 20, but the reference is Stoke LS. Am I right in this? Yes, is Callum Steele. Who's LS?
That will be one of the support staff who's typed it, I'm assuming. Leslie Stevenson, perhaps, from our organisation, who would something like this up.
But really, the second initials are a typist.
Yeah,
rather
the person
than
that's actually did the document.
So if we wanted questions about this circular type of information, Steele would be the best person to ask.
Yeah, I mean, so I would say he's the best person to speak about this.
I was going to say
document.
that. So does that indicate he's prepared it or he's authored it in some way?
Both, probably.
And this relates to FTOB circular dissemination to representatives to explain SPF position to members, not for publication.
Yeah.
And it relates to Black Lives Matter, the death file, and Mr. Amar Anwar.
Yep.
So is this the type of document that gives two office bearers by the sort of one of the national officers of the SPF?
Yeah, I mean it appears to be an internal.
Sorry, it is not working, and it seems the subscriber can't hear everything that's being said. I'm told the live stream is neither at the moment.
Aware that there were some potential issues this on. I think we'll just adjourn and get this sorted out.
I wondered what all the chatting was about.
Well, I'm hopeful that what has been done in the interim will allow us to proceed. And I see something coming up on the transcription, which is a good sign. I'm told there's a possibility that it might not work. If it doesn't, then we'll have to stop for a longer period. But let's carry on meantime. Ms. Graham.
Thank you. I don't believe any of my questions were recorded, so I'll go quickly again through what we covered after lunch. The document I was asking you about was the FTOB circular. This one's number 5 of 2020, and you had told us what this document is. What does FTO?
Yeah, it's effectively the equivalent of a kind of internal memo to the full-time office bearers. This particular one is asking for it to be disseminated further to the local representatives, but it was initially sent out to all those within the east, the west, the north and the national officials for their information to then forward on.
And they then absorb the information contained in this and disseminate it further
Absolutely.
to the membership.
Yeah, that's correct.
And this type of document, a circular such as this, would this be funneled through, or the content of it be funneled through or approved by the committee that you told us about?
No, not necessarily. I don't remember any discussion. The first of me seeing this document was when it arrived in my inbox. So I think it's been, if it's been discussed by anyone, it's not been discussed in my presence, but it's certainly signed by Callum Steele, so it looks like the General Secretary has sent this out.
And I think before we stopped, you said that because it's Callum Steele's reference and he's signed the document, if the inquiry want more information about it, he's probably the best person to ask.
I would expect the fact that he signed it, Callum's the best person to speak to. Yeah.
So you didn't see it until it was actually circulated to you sometime around the 9th of June 2020?
Yeah, if it was sent out on the 9th of June, and they normally come out the same date that they're dated, I will have read that. I'm not in an area committee, so it wouldn't be my responsibility to disseminate that. So other than reading it, I've not really had any further responsibility to share it with anyone.
And you didn't have any personal involvement in preparing the document or deciding what it said?
No.
Thank you. And then can I ask you some questions about SPF's involvement with consultation documents that are maybe released by the Scottish Government?
Yes.
And the approach to those. Now, again, we may hear evidence about this later, about a report prepared by Dame Ailish Angelini.
Yeah.
And that related to her independent review of complaints handling, investigations and misconduct issues.
That's right, yeah.
And I'm wondering whether you personally had any involvement in preparing the written submissions for the SPF in response to the government consultation document.
Yeah, for that particular document, much of it falls within my remit of the conduct portfolio. So I was involved in contributing to the document that was returned. Yes, as were many other full-time office bearers. Yeah.
Right. And you can take it from me, this was signed by Callum Steele, General Secretary, on the 30th of November 2020, but you said you contributed.
Yeah, I think, from memory, I think we had a gathering of full-time office bearers who were familiar with the content, who were involved in that area of work, and we went through every recommendation and came to a kind of collective view. Not all of the time, sometimes there are differing views, but that was all provided to assist in the preparation of the document, which would be Callum's responsibility as the General Secretary to send that back.
Would he approve the final version, final response?
Yes, most likely.
With contributions from the other office
Absolutely.
bearers?
Yeah.
Right. There was mention of in that document of the SPF having an excellent working relationship with diversity staff associations. Do you know anything about who those associations are?
Yeah, well, there's a number of diversity associations. James Thompson would probably be the best person because he would probably be the SPF point of contact for that. But I know who they are. There'll be the Disability Association. There'll be SEMPAR. There'll be the Women's Development Forum. And there will be the... I think who I've missed. Yeah, there's maybe about 6 or 7 in total.
Is James Thompson the best person to identify? You've told us he dealt with equality.
Quality and people.
He's in the same role as you.
Yeah.
He deals with equality and
Yeah.
people. Would he be better placed
Yeah,
to...
I suppose depending on what information you're looking from, but yeah, he would know all the individuals within these organisations that the SPF deal with on a regular basis.
Thank you. And then there was mention in this response of dedicated officials in all areas of the country working on equality issues. Do you know who they would be?
At the time, I might struggle to tell you in 2015 who they were, but
This is a response from November 2020.
Yeah. So as I've explained earlier, the SPF is split into east, west, and north, and in each of these areas, there's a full-time office bearer in that area that leads on equality, health and safety, and conduct matters within their area. So if there's a divisional issue, then they don't. It doesn't necessarily need to be a national issue. If there's something local to that particular area, then the full-time office bearer who kind of leads on these things, who's got a bit more knowledge than everyone else, will be the single point of contact for that. So yeah, I don't know who that would have been at that time. I can tell you who they are now, but I'm not sure who that would have been back in 2015 or at the time
in 2020.
2020.
Who is it now?
So for equality matters.
Dedicated officials in all areas of the country working on equality issues.
So there are some current changes ongoing. So at the moment, I believe in the north, it's Caroline McNaughton that covers the north area of the country. In the east, it's Andy Malcolm. Andy Malcolm's a bit in the same boat as myself, as he retires at the end of the month. And in the west, you're making me think here, is Adam Peppard, whose responsibility for it currently.
He's not retiring?
No, he's not. No.
Thank you. And then can you tell me what training is given to full-time office bearers on diversity?
We have an external assistance in respect of equality matters. So that training comes from sorry, I'm trying to think of her name. Jane Monkhouse. On a kind of, I think, as I understand, on a kind of consultancy basis, and she provides equality training. What the component parts of that are.
She could tell us.
Yeah, she could tell you.
And she's an independent contractor, effectively.
Yeah.
She's not employed by SPF.
No, she's not. She's not a full-time employee of us, but she comes in and provides any equality training that we're needing.
Okay. And then there was also mention of retained access to specialists in their field, including former senior members of the Equality and Human Rights Commission and legal experts who specialise in employment law. So let's look at access to specialists in their field, including former senior members of the Equality and Human Rights Commission.
I don't know whether that might be Jane Monkhouse. Right. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what her personally. I'm not sure what her background is. That might be her.
We can explore that
yeah,
with her.
I'm not sure who any of the other individuals.
The legal experts in employment law?
Yeah, I mean, we do have legal experts that we deal with, but I'm not going to be able to tell you
No, that's
who that is.
Thank you, you've been helpful. Can I ask you about discussions which were ongoing in the canteen?
Yes.
And can we look at paragraph 102 of your inquiry statement, please? And you were asked about the update and whether black was mentioned, and you said yes, it was the basis of the police being called that there was a black man, and whether they want to accept it or not, that would be relatively unusual in Kirkcaldy. That was how the individuals that witnessed it described him. So that's the only reason that I knew he was black. I don't recall there being any other discussion about it, because I was avoiding encouraging any discussion about it, because being aware of the process. It is about getting information from each individual about what they recall, not about getting a group view back. So it was avoided. Yeah. So can I ask you, first of all, on line 3 you say it would be relatively unusual in Kirkcaldy. Can you give me some context to that?
Yeah, I've never worked in Kirkcaldy on a full-time basis, but I have gone along there for certain investigations that were ongoing. And I suppose it would be my perception, having lived in Kirkcaldy for a short period of time when I first joined the police, that you know, I'm not familiar with the black community in Kirkcaldy, so it was based on my perception of the makeup of the community.
And does that include the makeup of Kirkcaldy Police Office itself?
Oh, now I don't work there, so I'm not sure what the makeup of the officers is that work there. But you know, black officers are very much in the minority, certainly within Fife.
Thank you. And then you talk about the. Am I right in thinking the discussion that you're talking about there? This was you in the canteen. You were avoiding encouraging any discussion because you were aware of the process. And what was that you were meaning?
So when I make reference to black being mentioned, I'm specifically meaning in relation to the update that I got from Scott Maxwell, who provided me the brief resume. Within that update, he told me that the man involved was a black man. Thereafter, I didn't really need to know any more specifics about what had happened. So because the process is about knowing your belief or your recollections of it, it's not about getting a collective view. I didn't want to encourage that, and in fact I discouraged it, so the subject would have been changed. So there was no further discussion about the incident, really.
So do you remember any discussion in the canteen about Mr. Bile being black, or the possible implications of him being black?
No, I don't. My recollection is that the black was mentioned during the brief introduction that I was given on my arrival. That was the only reason I knew that fact, and that it wasn't a factor. I didn't appear to be a factor thereafter.
Do you remember any discussions at all in the canteen amongst the officers about the potential for racism or allegations of racism to rear its head?
Not at that time in the canteen. I think that, you know, these worries came later, in the days following, when things didn't seem to progress.
When you say they came later, where did they come later?
Just during discussion of that there had been no clarification on whether they were suspects or witnesses, and the longer that came, people were assuming that they were going to be suspects, and there was a worry about whether that might be connected to the fact he was a minority.
And was that a discussion ongoing in SPF, or was it a discussion going on more widely with the police?
I think it was more widely with the police. Yeah, it certainly wasn't something that was widely discussed within the SPF.
Do you remember who was having those discussions in the police?
It would have been in the group. You know, we didn't meet individually. They met collectively as a group, because Police Scotland were looking to check up on them and check that they were okay. So they would have come in a group setting of some, you know, I'm worried about this, or what's likely to happen.
When did they meet in a group?
So that was in the days that followed. They met at Kirkcaldy Police Station.
Oh, did that happen once or more than once?
I think it perhaps happened more than once. I think I was only there once.
When were you there?
Either the next day or the next again day. I can't be certain.
So within 2 days
Within
of
2 days,
the
yeah.
events. Where did you meet?
We met in a conference room at Kirkcaldy Police Station.
And what was the purpose of that meeting?
Was well, the purpose and the reason they were asked to get together was to update them on what was happening.
Who arranged that meeting?
That would have been it would be the management at Kirkcaldy. So I try to think who. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure who physically contacted the officer. It wasn't done through me. It might even, I mean, it should have been done through Conrad Trickett. So perhaps it was him. I'm just not clear on that.
When did that meeting take place?
Either the next day, so the Monday or the Tuesday.
Was it the morning, afternoon, later? Do you remember the time?
No.
What was your role in attending that meeting?
Just accompanying the police officers, for nothing more than having been there on the Sunday all day, a continuity of care, effectively welfare.
What was discussed at that meeting?
Again, from recollection, it was about updating on post-mortem information, and checking how they were.
How the officers were?
How the officers were. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, just a general gathering of staff and senior officers, looking to ensure that they were okay.
Which senior officers were there?
I am fairly certain that was the first time that I saw Gary McEwen, who was the Chief Inspector, who was the kind of divisional commander of Fife Division. I'm fairly certain that he was there.
Anyone else that you remember?
There will have been other individuals, inspectors and chief inspectors. Again, when the chief superintendent's there, I'm not sure that anybody's really paying attention to anyone else. I remember Gary McEwen being there. I don't recall who else was there.
And the officers who'd attended at Hayfield Road.
And again, I'm not certain that all of them had attended. I seem to recall that perhaps Nicole Short and Alan Payton might not have been present due to just being unwell.
Okay.
I think everyone else was there.
Thank you. Going back to SPF as an organisation, you've told us about your membership.
Yep.
And how many office bearers, if any, are black or from an ethnic minority?
Now,
Yes?
none that I'm aware of.
In 2015?
None. Don't think.
How many local representatives are black or ethnic minority?
No idea. I mean, there will be when it gets to the local representatives, you're talking, there's kind of 40 in each area, and I honestly couldn't tell you.
You've talked about your membership being at upwards of 16,000.
There or thereabouts, yeah.
How many are black or from an ethnic minority?
However many black or ethnic minority police officers we have that are in the rank of constable to chief inspector, I'm not sure what that number is, but I'm quite sure Police Scotland could give you that.
And do you think James Thompson might be able to help us with that?
I think if he knows you're going to ask him that question when he comes here, I'm sure he'll come armed with that information.
Right. In the roles that you've held within SPF in the past 20 years, how many occasions have you been contacted by officers who are black?
Probably about, I'm guessing, about half a dozen, to somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen, for conduct matters mainly.
So if it was a conduct matter, maybe a complaint that had been received,
Yep.
that they could come to you for advice or guidance. And have you been contacted in your time with SPF about any allegations of racism within Police Scotland?
Yes.
How many times?
A couple.
Can you give us some details of those?
They all fall within the conduct area, where there was a perception that the conduct allegations, the conduct process, had been brought about by the race. So that was my involvement.
So the officer themselves were concerned about the disciplinary proceedings being racially motivated.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And were you involved in dealing and handling with those matters?
I was to the point where they were then allocated to someone else, and they dealt with them.
Right. Do you know the outcome of those concerns that were expressed? Or was that dealt with by the other person?
Yeah, it was dealt with by other people, and there obviously were ongoing misconduct matters to be dealt with, but so I wouldn't...
Between you starting as an officer in 92 and 2015, when these events took place, what training had you had in equality and diversity matters?
Again, don't ask me when it was, but I attended when it was first introduced, and certainly I think that was when it was still part of Fife Constabulary.
When was that?
Yeah, I'm guessing at some time in the 20s, the 2000s, and yeah, I couldn't be certain on that. But I attend, I think it's a three day course at Glenrothes in respect of all diversity training.
In the noughties?
Yeah, at some point. I don't know when.
Anything apart from that?
No, I mean there's been more recently when a professional standards department provide training for those senior officers that carry out the role of a chair or an assessor at a misconduct hearing, and I've been present when the training on unconscious bias is included in that training, but that's a more recent development.
Tell me about the training you've had on unconscious bias.
As I recall, it was an hour's input, and it was an external trainer that came in and did it. So it wasn't
like Jane Monkhouse.
No, a bit like Jane. It wasn't Jane Monkhouse. I can't remember the chap's name, but he came in and spoke about unconscious bias. I actually think there was a couple of kind of exercises involved in that. I can't really give you any more detail on it, but it covered more than just the race aspect of it. It was all kind of diversity issues, and I have to say it was the first training that I can recall of unconscious bias.
When was that?
So that would have been probably in the past couple, certainly since this incident. So in the last 3 years, probably.
Were you, as part of that training, were you asked to identify your own unconscious bias?
Yeah.
Were you able to do that?
It was a kind of group scenario, so whilst it was all contributing to it, so yeah.
What sort of unconscious bias was identified?
Oh, God, I can't remember. So it covered kind of racism, it covered sexism, homophobic, and people were quite honest in saying where they didn't, they didn't feel that they had a lot of knowledge or information of it, and that to ask questions was much better than to have a perception, and keep that.
Mm-hmm. So it encouraged an open mindset.
Yeah. I suppose it was all about it was specifically in respect of chairing a misconduct hearing where information or evidence may be presented suggesting that an officer had behaved in a particular way, but there might be other information to hear in respect of that. So please don't come in with a closed mind. That was pretty much what I took away from the training.
And in terms of guarding against your own unconscious bias, was that something that they thought was a good thing to do, to keep an open mind?
Absolutely. It was all about keeping an open mind. Yeah.
And asking questions.
Absolutely.
And if you weren't sure, ask more questions.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Are you aware of any negative views being held by colleagues in the SPF in relation to black people?
Am I
aware of that?
No. No.
Have you ever, you've obviously been a police officer for a long time, have you ever encountered racist comments or jokes?
By police officers?
By police officers.
No.
Have you ever seen colleagues display that type of behaviour where they've made racist comments?
No.
If you did come across that type of behaviour, how would you react?
I think Police Scotland's advice on this is that you challenge the behaviour and you report it. So I'm not one that would sit back and I joined the police in 1992. I am very aware that we're not all treated equally. When I joined the police, police women weren't issued with trousers. We wore skirts and had a handbag. So I am I'm very aware that not everyone has always been treated fairly. So I wouldn't sit back and not challenge something that I believe was wrong or was racist or homophobic or sexist. I would absolutely speak my mind.
I have to ask, what did you keep in the handbag?
Your notebook, your ridiculously small baton that women were issued because we didn't get the same baton as our male colleagues, a spare pair of tights, because you were required to wear 20 denier tights in those days, and a little tin that had your yellow chalk if you went to a yellow crane if you went to a road accident because you had to mark the car. That's what you kept in your handbag.
It's fair to say Police Scotland don't issue you with a handbag now.
Thankfully, you had a waterproof skirt as well. So thankfully, we have moved on considerably in the 30 years that I've been in the police.
good. In terms of the joint central committee that you've talked about, can I ask, what would their attitude be if anyone within SPF demonstrated an intolerant attitude or a racist attitude in the work they're doing for SPF?
Do you mean one of the full-time office bearers displayed that behaviour?
Yes, and members of the joint committee. You said it wasn't just office
Yeah.
bearers; it was laypersons.
So yeah, I think if there was, the SPF has its own rules, as you would expect any committee to have. So if there were concerns about an individual's behaviour or comments, that there are processes in place to deal with that.
And that would be would that involve not just overt racism, but covert or
Yeah,
implied
absolutely.
racism?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Could you just give me a moment, please? I've no further questions.
Thank you. Are there any Rule 9 applications? No, just give me a moment. Ms. Mitchell? Dean of Faculty? Dean of Faculty, am I right in thinking that you represent Ms. Givan?
Indeed so.
Well, I'll come back to you then at the end. Now, Constable Givan, I wonder if you would withdraw to the witness room while I hear submissions. Now, Ms. Mitchell, perhaps you come up first. Yes.
Yes, sir. A number of issues. The first one is what my learned friend has talked about is immediate post-incident management, i.e. The return to the police station. And I would like to ask some questions about her understanding of when PERC became involved. So I would like to ask questions about this based on the fact that she said at page 73, the PERC, and then something inaudible, made aware that they were investigating the matter. So she became aware of that circumstance, and I was going to ask her, do you remember when she heard that PERC was investigating the matter? Do you remember when a representative from PERC arrived? Did she speak to them? And if so, what was said? She has touched upon the fact that the most senior officer present at that time was Scott Maxwell in the room, who she said I think was a constable. And I wish to ask her, did she know Scott Maxwell was involved with the incident, and how did she know this? Given that he was the most senior officer back at the canteen for some time, asking whether or not he was the appropriate person in her view to be in charge of the situation, and if not, why not? And that's because of her evidence that there seemed to be no one in charge. She also, when she explained that there was no one in control of the canteen area, it appears to be approximately between about 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 or 11, asking whether or not she expressed any concerns to anyone about the lack of senior police presence for that period of time. Moving then on to collusion, or the appearance of collusion. I wanted to ask her questions in relation to a number of things. Firstly, given the fact that she realised for the potential for officers to be witnesses or suspects, whether or not she had any concerns that officers were all being kept together, which may result in the appearance or the potential of an appearance for collusion, and to ask whether or not she took any steps in that regard or thought of flagging that up with anyone. moving on, under the same vein, she indicated that she flagged up the issue of post-incident management with Superintendent Pat Campbell. The inquiry might have heard that her evidence was that he seemed surprised by that, and she indicated that if a supervisor had been present, they could have done something, for example, just ensure that the kind of principles of post-incident procedure have been maintained. And she was asked by the senior counsel to the inquiry, maintained and observed, and she said yes. And it's to ask against that background whether or not she considered raising with someone that officers should, to protect against allegations of collusion, actual collusion or the perception of it, be separated, to be put in separate places. And she gave evidence when asked by the inquiry about how the process had now changed for obtaining information. Now, I appreciate the inquiry will come to you, no doubt, in much greater detail about the practices and procedures of post-incident management, but she was asked about the process that was now in place, and she indicated that police officers who are involved in post-incident procedure will provide a brief outline of their involvement and then given 40 hours in order to give a longer statement. And what I wish to explore with this witness is, in the new post-incident procedures, are police officers separated from each other to ensure that their evidence is not contaminated, either intentionally or unintentionally? I wouldn't ask to go any further with that, just to provide giving that statement in that form of context. Moving on to the next issue, in relation to the canteen, she indicated that she'd said, look, let's not talk about this. And that was in particular in relation to Nicole Short's vest. And I wanted to ask her what talking was going on about this and whether or not she recalled what was being said.
Have you got a transcript reference for
Yes,
that?
certainly. That's page 76. She said, look, let's not talk about this. On the issue of race, she was in the canteen for a number of hours. This inquiry has heard evidence that there was an apprehension of media attention and possible public response in relation to the death of a black man in custody. And I wish to ask whether or not anyone discussed this possibility in the canteen. The witness also gave evidence at page 18 in relation to Callum Steele and the potential misconduct proceedings from Police Scotland in relation to tweets connected with the inquiry and the events in Hayfield Road on the 3rd May. And the inquiry, senior counsel of the inquiry said, I'm interested in whether that causes any conflicts or issues to arise in relation to the Joint Central Committee and his position. And her response was, she was trying to think whether or not there had been any discussion about that at the Joint Central Committee, and she didn't think there had been. And she further gave the response, I think, Callum is tweeting as an individual. He wasn't tweeting from the SPF account. I don't remember that being part of any discussion, if I'm being honest. And what I would like to ask this witness is whether or not she recalled any discussion about Callum Steele changing his Twitter name, and whether or not she was aware that he was tweeting as Callum Steele SPF, and that changed to Callum A. Steele. So to see whether or not she was aware of that. The next issue was that this witness gave evidence at the start of the afternoon at page 113-14 in relation to an FTOB circular. This is the one headed Black Lives Matter, the death of Sheikh Abayo Amar Anwar. And she indicated it's effectively an equivalent of a type of internal memo to the full-time office bearers. But this particular one is asking for it to be disseminated further to the local representatives. What I was wanting to ask her was how many representatives there are. Are there circumstances in which these memos are circulated to all members, and whether or not she is aware if this memo was sent to all members? The next issue is that this witness explained to us about a meeting that took place days after the event. This was at a time, of course, when the status of the police was not yet decided, and the witness has given evidence that there was discussion about the post-mortem. So I would like to ask this witness if they can remember what the issues were about the post-mortem. And also, does this witness have any information in relation to what this inquiry might come to hear of as being described as a welfare meeting taking place with the Chief Constable, Sir Stephen House, and police officers involved in the incident? Was she present? Who else was present? And what was said? And finally, she indicated that she'd been given training in respect of unconscious bias, but that was in particular to carry out the role as a chair or an assessor at misconduct hearing, and to ask whether or not she knows if there's any training out with this context more generally to police officers.
These are your issues.
Yes.
Thank you. If you just perhaps return to your seat, please. Mr. Moyer.
Sir, I have one question that I would wish to put to this witness, and it relates to the meeting a day or so after the actual incident. Indeed, my learned friend, Miss Mitchell, has already mentioned that. And the question I would have, was there any discussion at the meeting at Kirkcaldy Police Office a day or so later regarding Mr. Bow's race by either the officers in attendance or any of the senior officers? The Chair will remember that Senior Counsel to the inquiry asked about that, and got the reply it was post-mortem information that was discussed and checking how they were. But I would like to ask whether or not race was raised by any of the officers, whether they be senior officers or the actual junior officers involved.
Thank you. If you return to your seat. And Dean of Faculty, would you come down?
Lord, I wonder if I might reserve this position until the others have questioned, as I did with previous witnesses. It might make more sense if I respond once I've heard everything.
Very well. Well, there's quite a lot of material there, so I'll adjourn to consider these submissions. Well, I'm conscious that the inquiry will be thoroughly examining the issue of post-incident management and the issue of media engagement at later hearings. I'm therefore minded to restrict questioning of this witness to issues that are within her knowledge. So I shall allow questioning as to her knowledge of the stage at which PIRC became involved on the 3rd of May. I shall allow questioning, or further questioning, in relation to who was in charge in the canteen. I do not consider that the inquiry would be assisted further by further exploration of the issue of collusion with this witness, so I shall not allow any questioning on that issue. That, of course, is clearly an issue in which the inquiry will have an interest in due course. In relation to Nicole Short's vest and the conversation, I consider that this is simply a reference to her earlier approach to discouraging discussion and need not be further elaborated. So I shall not permit any further questioning on that. In relation to discussion of race in the canteen, I do not think that that issue can be taken further forward with this witness, so I shall not allow further questioning on that. In relation to the use of Twitter by Callum Steele and the Callum Steele circular, I think these are both matters that are better left to be explored further in detail in the hearing on media issues. In relation to the meeting which this witness attended in the days after the 3rd of May, I shall allow the proposed questioning. In relation to the meeting with the then Chief Constable, that is a matter which should be properly explored in the hearing on post-incident management. And I shall allow the questioning in relation to more general training on unconscious bias. I shall allow Mr. Moyer to ask his question. So, Ms. Mitchell, if you would come to the table and we can have the witness back. Sorry, are you?
Yes, I wonder if I just might.
Yes.
I wonder if I just might clarify one matter.
Certainly.
There was,
You better come up so that the microphone picks you up.
Just so I can get it correctly, I'll be asking the PIRC questions. I wonder whether or not the inquiry can remind me whether or not I should be able to ask questions in relation to Scott Maxwell being the most senior person there, and whether or not he was the appropriate person in her view to be in charge of the situation.
Yes, I said I allow questioning in relation to who was in charge in the canteen.
I'm obliged. And whether or not she expressed any concerns to anyone about the lack of senior police officers present.
Yes, yes, I'm just taking an umbrella approach.
And a whole. Okay, I'm obliged.
And you
Yes.
understand, at least, whether you're content or not, you understand the...
I understand,
yes,
well.
thank you. Can the witness back, please? Constable Gavin, you're going to be asked some questions by Ms. Mitchell, Senior Counsel for the Bio Families.
Thank you. I'm obliged. You spoke in your evidence about becoming aware that PIRC was involved on the day of the incident. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct, yep.
Do you remember when you became aware that PIRC was investigating the matter during the course of that day?
We were updated. So whenever Superintendent Campbell came in, he made us aware that it would be a PIRC investigation. Whether they were there at that point, I'm not sure. I didn't see anyone or anyone that I know from PIRC now. I'm not aware of seeing them, if that makes sense.
Okay, so we would take from that would be sometime after 11 a.m?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I take it then from what you've said, you don't remember a representative from PIRC arriving or speak to them?
My recollection is that no one from PIRC came in and spoke to anyone that was within that canteen area.
You've indicated in your evidence earlier also that the most senior officer present, by your recollection, for some time was Scott Maxwell. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you would have presumably been aware that Scott Maxwell was part of the group of people who'd been at Hayfield Road?
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you come to know that?
Sorry, how did I
How did you know that?
that he was at
Yes.
Hayfield Road? Because he was the person that gave me the update on what had happened, and had provided information. So he would have, did he tell me he was there? Yeah, he must have done. He must have said it, and that I turned up afterwards.
So do you recall him giving you a précis of the whole incident?
Yeah, he gave me a very brief resume of what had happened.
And is it your evidence, this inquiry, that he was effectively the person in charge, I'll maybe put that in inverted commas, for the period of time that between when you arrived and when Pat Campbell arrived?
No, sorry, I don't think he was the most senior officer that was present. He remained the sergeant of that shift. So he effectively would be in charge, but I'm not sure that he was in a position to be managing anything. He was in the same boat as everyone else within that hall. I would have expected someone else who hadn't been involved to come in and take responsibility for whatever needed to be done.
You perhaps preempted my next question. So although he was the most senior officer there, your evidence to this inquiry is that he wasn't actually in charge of anything?
No, it just so happened to be the most senior officer. I don't know what had happened prior to my arrival, whether he had given instructions, but he most certainly wasn't managing anything. He was very much one of the 9 officers.
Between the time that you arrived and the time when we got to 10:30, 11 o'clock, when Pat Campbell arrived, did you express concern to anybody about the lack of senior police presence for those first couple of hours?
I don't think I will have done that to the officers. I think they might, they're potentially already worried. I'm not sure that I would have raised my personal concerns with them at that time.
Would you express, or did you express your personal concerns with anyone out with those group of people?
Not at that time, I don't think, no.
And when you say not at that time, does that lead us to believe that you did at a later stage?
Had no one turned up to take charge, i.e. Chief Inspector Trickett, I would have, I probably would have raised it at that point to go, how much time needs to pass. But he came round about 10:30, 11 o'clock.
You've told us in your evidence about a meeting taking place days after the incident. Now, if we can just get the timeline clear, this was still at a time when, in your evidence at least, it wasn't clear whether or not people were witnesses or suspects.
That's correct, yep.
And you've given evidence to this inquiry that there was a discussion about the post-mortem.
This discussion is probably pushing it a bit. There was, I think, an update that the post-mortem had been carried out. I think that was the sum total of that.
Was it explained why they were giving that information?
No.
And was there anything discussed in that meeting about any of the findings of the post-mortem?
No.
So is your evidence simply that they were told a post-mortem had taken place?
Yeah, it was an update on that.
Can you remember anything else that they were updated on?
They were updated on things like the efforts to provide them with alternative uniform clothing, and clearly some of those present, as I had said earlier, their footwear at that time was purchased by them. Most police officers have only got one set of boots that they use, so those being seized was problematic, and there were plans put in place for alternative footwear by Police Scotland providing that.
Other than those sorts of administrative things, was anything else said about anything that had happened the day before?
No, it wasn't about the investigation or anything that had happened the day before. It was a welfare, well-being check. That was certainly that certainly seemed to be the focus of the get-together.
Can you tell us how long that meeting lasted?
Yeah, not long, about an hour in total. And I say no, I can't be certain that everyone was present. There were some that were unwell.
Can you recall who was unwell?
I don't recall Nicole being there, Nicole Short being there, and I don't recall Alan Payton being there. I think everyone else was present.
And you've said that you recall Gary McEwen being present.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you remember any more senior officers?
I want to say that Nicola Shepherd was there because I would expect Nicola Shepherd to be present because she was the Chief Inspector of that station. But I don't actually know for certain. I would have expected her to be there. I can't think of anyone else.
Moving on, you were giving evidence earlier on, and you explained that in terms of the issue of unconscious bias, training has been given more recently to senior officers in a particular context. And you said that context is if you're a chair or an assessor at a misconduct hearing.
Yeah.
Can you tell the inquiry, do you know if there is any training out with this context given to police officers?
I'm not aware of. I don't know if there is training. I've certainly never attended it. The only training that I'm aware of was part of that chair and assessor training that I attended. I don't know personally.
Mr. Moore. Constable Gavin, you're now going to be asked questions by Mr. Moyer, Senior Counsel for the Coalition for Racial Equality and Rights.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Moyer.
Thank you, sir. Constable Givan, all I want to ask you about is the meeting that occurred a day or so after the incident. What I would like to ask you about, was there any discussion at Kirkcaldy Police Office at that meeting regarding Mr. Bio's race by either the junior officers in attendance or indeed any of the senior officers in attendance?
No, I mean it was a welfare meeting, so it was more about them than what had happened. It wasn't part of the investigation side of things. So I don't recall any discussion about Mr. Bayou other than confirmation that there had been a post-mortem examination.
So in respect of Mr. Bayou, other than the reference to the post-mortem, there was no discussion about him or his race at all?
No, it was a meeting about the police officers.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Now, Dean of Faculty, do you have a matter? Now, do you think that the constable should withdraw while we discuss this?
It's a matter for your lordship. It's only one matter I want to clarify.
What's the area of it?
It's regarding the vest and the markings on the vest.
Yes, very well, I should allow you to ask.
Yeah, I'm obliged. Constable Givan, you'll recall being asked by counsel for the inquiry about markings that you saw on the vest of Nicole Short in the canteen when you met with the officers afterwards. Can I just clarify that, please, under reference to some photographs? And I wonder, please, if we're able to have on screen PERC-0117.
Is that possible?
Is it 1176?
1176, I'm obliged. Thank you. And page 47, yes, thank you, that's it there. If you look at the label on that, Constable Givan, you'll see that the label indicates it was taken from PC Nicole Short at Kirkcaldy Police Station, 3rd of May 2015 at 18:08 to 18:12 hours. You see that?
Yeah.
Now that's maybe not that helpful, but it comes out of the bag if we turn on to page 48. And again, you'll see the same label there, and I wonder if for the chair you could identify, if indeed it's there, the mark of which you spoke when you gave evidence earlier.
Yeah, so the way it was sitting or standing, I've not particularly saw the side part of it. But the mark on the back is the dirty mark I was referring to, so just below the silver and the sort of centre panel. Okay, so do you remember seeing the sort of more dirty mark further to the right? I don't remember seeing the part that would have been to the side, but I do remember seeing the part in the middle panel below the police sign. And I don't know if it's possible. Are you able? Does the screen respond? No. So just looking then, and so we can orientate ourselves. There's a horizontal stripe, 2 horizontal stripes, and there are 2 vertical stripes. Yep. And you are referring to, if we were to imagine the vest as it would have been worn, you are talking about the mark immediately under the top horizontal stripe and its junction with the rightmost vertical stripe. Is that right? Sorry, it's gone. Sorry, it's gone. Yes. So the exactly what you've said there. Yeah, I'm the mark that I recall seeing was the part that's in the middle panel, where the silver reflective, I don't know what you call that, band is, but the part that is not the part that's below on the screen, the horizontal line. Yeah. Okay. Does that? That's helpful, thank you. So if we envisage that being worn by Miss Short, that would be what the lower right of her back? Yeah, that would be her right side. And my recollection is that this vest was zipped up and standing, and my recollection is seeing the back of it. Okay, clearly. You. And just for clarity, if we go into page 50, please. Now, slightly confusing. Keep going, please. It's the close-up, page 50 of the PDF. Now, that's, I think, in a different orientation. Yeah. But again, are you talking about the marking, again, below the junction of the 2 lines? Yeah. That's what you remember seeing? Yeah, so there's a less reflective part of that. So it's what's to the right of that I remember seeing. I think that's It looks like it might be upside down because I think the black mark on the bottom right is a clip where you would attach
Yeah.
something. So it's a bit confusing whether that's the right way up or upside down.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Constable. Obliged, man.
Well, Constable Givan, thank you very much for coming to give evidence to the inquiry. You're now free to go.
Thank you.
Now, Ms Graham.
We have no further witnesses for the remainder of the day.
Thank you. We'll adjourn. Now, am I right in thinking then that the inquiry will sit again on Friday morning?
That's correct, yes.
Well, we'll sit again on Friday morning at 10 o'clock.